flower?
She's with us, yes?
We will get a sign, so because yeah, and we need the photographer.
He will come in and out. They come on and out.
Yes, we start. Just a few more seconds and then we start. Huh? Is it? I don't know. I have to do it? Do I have to press the microphone? Okay, fantastic. In a couple of seconds we start. We're just getting the banner. Oh. Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everybody. I'm so happy that you are here and that we have the chance to have this session here today. I would like to thank the Bled Strategic Forum for inviting us and the Global Diplomacy Lab. You see, we just put up the banner for also putting us in this stage. I'm very happy to see known faces, but also new faces here. I see Ambassador here. Thank you very much for your time. And fellow GDL members. Our session today is about heritage beyond borders, turning local roots into global strength. Turning local roots into global strength. We want to explore today how cultural heritage has the power to overcome parallel realities, and we have three experts who have done so in their professional life, but also with their activism. I would like to introduce you our panelists today. In the middle here, we have Dagmer Hovestadt. She's a communication expert and researcher and a writer. She works at the intersection of transitional justice, archives, and human rights, and supports non-profit journalism and fact-finding. Very important in these days. For the last decade, she was also the spokesperson for the Federal Commissioner of the Stasi records in Germany. Among other affiliations, she's a trustee and an executive board member of Correctiv, a German non-profit journalism media house. We hear from them regularly in the news, making important discoveries, which I think give a big contribution to democracy and to transparency. On my left, is it left? On my left? It's always like you have to switch. Dr. Banu Pekol. Her work focuses on peace building and conflict transformation in relation to contested cultural heritage. She's currently working with the BMW Foundation, promoting social justice and sustainability in urban areas. With an academic background, she's an activist and founded a social enterprise on cultural heritage at risk. Her PhD research was on the reuse of historic buildings and collective memory. And here, last but not, what is it? Least but not, what is it?
Last but not least.
Thank you, David. Dr. Annegret Warth-Shahlaei. She has extensive experience in academia, civil society, and administration. At the city of Stuttgart, she leads a network promoting education for sustainable development through intersectional cooperation. She uses her business coaching skills to implement agile working cultures and overcome silo structures in local administration. Her PhD research was on international youth and how to overcome Eurocentric approaches studying Global South. So very diverse backgrounds, but also always in the intersection of different categories, right? I would like to ask you just to switch to our presentation now, if you could. Sorry? Yeah, we can go immediately to Module 1 and to the research that our colleague Sarah will do in the background for us. Because at the GDL we are known to have rather interactive sessions. This will be also in this case. We will have 3 parts. We start with some input from us, but also from you. I invite you to participate. Then we have some insights from our experts. And at the end, there will be, again, an interactive module to just have the idea and think outside the box for exploring opportunities, but also to see how we can use the tools that are within us in our everyday life, in our professions. So the first thing I would like to ask you is to think about, what do you think when you think about cultural heritage or your heritage? What do you think? What do you have in mind? Is it something personal, maybe something where you come from, maybe something global? Think about it. Please do so too, ladies. And we will then just explore what this is. Our colleague will maybe try to visualize it so we have an idea what the people think of. And we will maybe talk also a bit why we chose this. So I will ask immediately maybe Annegret. Annegret, can you tell us what you think when you think about your heritage?
Sure. So I come from the southwest of Germany. I come from a rural region. And I chose the Biosphärenreservat Schwäbische Alb. That's a very complicated name, but I'm living I grew up in a place nearby the Swabian Jura, which is like it's a mountainous region, and for me it always signified home. Like it was like it's cultural heritage, but on a very individual level. But later on, this area also was appointed for as a biosphere reservate within the UNESCO. So, but I just later came to realize that this has not only some personal meaning, but also a bigger, maybe even transnational meaning.
Thank you. And we will continue. We will see this in a couple of minutes. Dagmar, would you like to continue?
I can. I think there we go. My spontaneous reaction to that question was actually something that's called the Stolpersteine. And so it's not so much personal, but it's definitely tied in with collective memory, with the whole of Germany. But I also look at history and what we can learn from it. And it is something that is outside my door every day. It's an initiative that was started by citizens of Germany a number of years ago, commemorating Jews that have lived in the same streets that you live today, that were deported into the concentration camps to perish. So it is a very active memory of every day, but it's a heritage that Germans confront. It's a dark chapter of our heritage, terribly dark. And it has kept us busy for the last 80 years to the betterment of democracy, I believe. And so this little sign you see that people take care of, they polish it, they put flowers down, is a constant reminder of that we have to be better than what we did before. And to me, that is a good sign of our heritage.
Thank you. I will come back to you. I will come right back to you, but maybe in between we have already some people who want to contribute. Some of you, do you have, what comes in your mind? David, yes, please.
So I'm not a very religious person, but I was born into a Jewish family. And so there's two things there. One, I always thought, as far as I know, for several generations, my family had the same traditions, whether it was celebrating Hanukkah or Yom Kippur. But what was also interesting, I mean, I'm an American, we immigrated there, and I've traveled around. But when I visited other countries and went, for example, to the country of Georgia, to the synagogue, and met Jewish people there, even though I was a complete foreigner, we could speak a few words of Hebrew, have a Passover Seder together, and that connected me very much so. So even as a not very religious person, the Jewish history and the Jewish culture is a big part of my heritage.
Thank you very much. Banu, would you like to continue maybe?
Sure. Mine is Camp Armen, which is a kids camp just outside Istanbul. And I came across it just after the Gezi protests, because it's a camp built by the orphan children after the Armenian genocide. And the government was trying to take it back, and there were protests there, and I went there to research it. And there was a great number of people who weren't of Armenian descent, but had the similar feeling towards wanting change, wanting a better life, wanting transparency and just democracy. And this building has no architectural value. I'm an architectural conservationist, but we were working to preserve the memory of it. And so this was it. And you had a lot of people you can see when it was, the protest was inside. So it was quite life-changing for me, seeing a building with no architectural value being so important.
So we have something that is an emotional connection, right, rather than what we would consider in a everyday or in the wider sphere of value. Can you? Would you like to continue? Some of you. What do you think when you think of heritage? There are no wrong answers. Yes, please.
Well, maybe I could contribute. Okay, maybe it's easier this way. So, why I wanted to choose this particular session today is because it's of interest to me for personal reasons also. I'm originally from Finland myself, so share a lot of, the Nordic values and all of that. Moving to Slovenia now almost 20 years ago.
Okay.
Of course, introduced me to an entirely new cultural frame, a different part of Europe, still Europe. So there's always all these different layers to what do I identify, because I think cultural heritage and all of these things are also part of our identity, and they tell a lot about who am I, where do I come from, what do I identify with, and it has a lot to do with, we tend to often think in terms of them and us, and then the more you're exposed to these kinds of things, the more you are curious and open to other people's heritage and their ways of thinking, the more it opens your eyes to understanding yourself, and kind of it makes you question the idea of what's normal, because and that's why I think these kinds of conversations are so important, because we tend to easily oversimplify and think too fast in terms of like, oh, but that's just how it is, or this is just normal. And when we open our eyes and minds and hearts to other possible ways of thinking, I think we can learn a lot, not only of others, but ourselves, and find common ground to connect with people that we might not otherwise connect with. And of course also my children have lived all of their life in Slovenia, so I already see with them the difference in, and of course there also is another twist that their father is half Serbian, so there's it can get complex in a international setting. So anyway, just wanted to share that and appreciate the fact that this is a topic that we're discussing, because I think that it's highly important and oftentimes neglected and overlooked.
Yeah, thank you very much. You're already going in the direction of what is cultural heritage. And I would like to ask Banu to tell us a little bit, what is cultural heritage, what can we imagine, what should we think about? We had some different examples. Can you maybe summarize it? Or
Very briefly, sure. I think what we just heard is a very good example, because cultural heritage is not always something tangible. It can be something natural. It can be something that a group of people, a civil society like the Stolpersteine initiated, and then has been taken up by a much larger group than they probably even envisioned. Or something you have in your family, your own past, something you will leave to your children. And this, when I look at the UNESCO World Heritage Site inscriptions, the words of kind of pilgrimage, crossover, transfer, these are very popular right now. And even when Japan was nominating its Tomioka silk mills, the Turkish ambassador made a big statement saying, oh, our Turkish history of silk is also connected, so we also support this nomination. So it's really transboundary, and we have this also as a actual term in cultural history and heritage. So it's just not only objects, but it's also concepts and recipes, songs, traditions, and it can be something as small as a stone, but as large as a biosphere.
Thank you, Dagmar. Yeah, Dagmar.
I wanted to add something, because what you mentioned as heritage as something fixed is actually not quite true, neither academically nor in the real world, right? It's a constant process. We can only look at memory and history and even heritage from today, but our today advances, right? So how we look at something yesterday will be different as we look at 20 years from now. And so what we seem to experience as a fixed heritage is continuously a process of negotiation, which is to some people a little unnerving, but it's also a great chance to not understand history or your memory, or general memory, collective memory, or heritage as fixed.
Yes, thank you, Dagmar. You have another one. Thank you. Please. Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment, like you said, heritage can be developed or something. I'm married to Canadian actually he's descended from Slovenians, but he was born in Canada. He never spoke Slovene anyways. We got married 30 years ago, and he was always saying, while he was living in Canada, I'm Slovene. But when he moved to Slovenia, he noticed that he's not Slovene. He's actually Canadian, because what he thought is a Slovene heritage, it was actually Canadian. So I just wanted to comment that his identity changed, even though DNA is Slovene. So just a comment.
Thank you. You would also like to?
Yeah, I wanted to share. So, hi. So I'm originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I've lived in the United States most of my life. I actually moved to United States before the war in Bosnia at age 16, so I'm neither here nor there. But to me, it was interesting coming from a culture where, especially in Europe, where everything goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, and we're so deeply rooted in what happened, I don't know, 300, 400, 600 years ago, to a culture that is so young and doesn't remember so far back. And somewhere along the line, I've discovered that maybe being so deeply rooted in your heritage is not the best idea to remember so far back. Mm-hmm. And maybe Americans should remember a little bit further back. So maybe, like, of course, I'm exaggerating because those are two extremes, but I think there's much to learn from European approach to heritage, which is so deeply rooted and so connected. Like, I connected to those streets made out of those granite blocks because I grew up with streets paved like that, you know, especially in old parts of towns. And with the mountains and with all of that, like the European heritage, I think it's a lot broader than you know, our states. Mm-hmm. And then to kind of learn from the American approach that is very like, let's look forward, let's not look back at all. Yeah. Instead of constantly looking back, and maybe for American culture to maybe remember a little bit further back, because I think both of those things have value. And now I have a daughter. Like, I've returned now after 20 years of the United States. I've returned back to Bosnia, where I am American, like I was Bosnian in America.
I see.
And we have our youngest kid. She's both American and Bosnian, and it's like really interesting trying to teach her to appreciate both of kind of those identities and to understand both. So cultural heritage has a lot of value, but it also how do you make it global, which I think is a great topic.
You touched upon a topic that I would like to sorry. You touched upon a topic that I would like to move on to Annegret, because it is, you said about remembering so far back and not remembering so far back, and also how you have memory sites maybe that are looking like in the past. And then the question is, how do we deal with them today? Or is there a new approach, or different approach how to deal with that? And I would invite Annegret to tell us a bit about your work that you have done in the Geiststraße in Stuttgart, where, yes, thank you, here it is, why local route matters, to tell us what you did there, what was the situation, and what your project intended.
Okay, thank you. We are talking about cultural heritage here mostly, from an international perspective. We all have background maybe in foreign policy, but I'm right now working at the city of Stuttgart, so I want to shed light also on more local dimensions of cultural heritage and how we can use, also include local populations to overcome, or to create common grounds. So I will tell you about a project I did together with Banu. It was not part of my work at the municipality. It was more on voluntary terms. Stuttgart is a city, like many cities in Germany. There's not so much left in terms of old buildings because of World War II. But in Stuttgart, there are some historical buildings left, and here you see, this building. It's located in the city center, and it's like a little quarter where there's still some old houses, but mostly it's now used like it's a recreation area. There you see also a lot of bars, so people actually don't know it by their history; they rather know it as a leisure place. And Banu and I, we were asking ourselves how we could connect young people to this historical building. No, wait, I have to tell you first about its history. That's important. So actually this building has a quite tragic history. In 1994, the building burned down because of an arson attack. And it was also in a time like in Germany, there was like nowadays like right-wing extremism on the rise. And while this building burned, 7 people came to death, and it was only like migrants and refugees that died in the flames. So you can...
Yeah, sorry, can I interrupt you? So the building, who was in the building when it burned down? Why was it a target?
Actually, that's a big discussion.
Okay.
Like, of course, you could think it's the motive. Like, there was a person like burning the building. Yeah. But immediately you would think maybe it was like a right-wing extremism motive, but actually it was not. But still, it's in the it has lots of reference to that. So it was traumatic. But then, it was the initiation of citizens coming together, founding a foundation, and nowadays you see it's restored. It's the place of a foundation. It's a cultural venue. People, lots of cultural activities, and still there are apartments which are rented to migrants and refugees. So you see that out of a tragic situation, still. People came together and brought and it has still relevance for today. So Banu and I were thinking, how can people will pass by, they don't recognize the history of the building. We were thinking of how could we engage young people with this building. So we worked together with different NGOs, and we invited youth groups to explore this building. And it was we worked together with vocational schools. There was also groups of refugees who have come newly to Germany to learn German. So we invited them to explore the place. We decided not to tell them about its history in beforehand. And with the guidance of a storyteller, the youth groups, they came, they just immersed into the building, got its atmosphere, looked into the rooms, and they were guided to connect their impressions of the buildings with their own biographies. So they were asked what does it remind you of? So there's some young people were discussing its relevance for climate change. Others told stories because the old building reminded them on their grandparents. Like some of the refugees, they saw the empty apartments, and immediately they started to think of, oh, that could be nice if I could live in there. Like, how would it be like to live in a city center? Yeah, and the results of the storytelling workshop were shown at an exhibition. That was the place where all the young people, the groups came together, and yeah, the results were also made revealed shown to the public. So in contrast to traditional history tours, where you would just visit a building and have a guide and learn about the history, and like you would rather consume the stories, we really wanted the young people to engage with the building and create also a personal connection. And it was also important for us that these perspectives on the building were shown to the public as well.
Okay, that is right. So in the process, thank you for explaining that. So in the process and through the engagement, there is also like a personal connection to the participants with this site, right? Mm-hmm. And this place that could be just another historical building in the city becomes actually a place where they have memories with it, right? Mm-hmm. This is like a very I would say, innovative approach in dealing with the site and cultural heritage. And what do you think, or maybe it is not possible, but can such projects contribute to overcome parallel realities? Because this is what we're talking a bit. Mm-hmm. How can we maybe utilize that, or is it possible?
Yeah. So what we tried to do is like to take a historic building to foster dialogue, to bring together people from different backgrounds, and taking it as a starting point, not only to talk about the history, but also to talk about their personal stories. And of course, this fosters mutual understanding. This fosters empathy. People were listening to each other, and furthermore, I think it also contributed to their local identity.
Thank you very much. Globally, is this something that is transferable, maybe, this experience on a local level, bring it from local to global?
Yes, in my perspective, I think if we talk about cultural heritage, and even from a global level, I think we always have to think about the different levels. Like here, we also heard stories about individual connections to heritage. And like as we are living in a world where there's a lot of mobility, people move to different countries, move to different cities, I think it's really also crucial to always have like, when you move to a new place, you want to create your own story, right? Mm-hmm. Like either by meeting new friends through your workplace, but it's also like there's a potential of heritage of buildings, that it's not only something you recognize as part of the city, but also recognize as part of yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can write your story also with history, and in this sense, it's a processual manner. Mm-hmm. And history is something you can work with and develop further.
Thank you very much, Annegret. At the end of the session, you will have chances to ask questions, but I would now move on to Dagmer, because we talked about engagement with cultural heritage on a local level, and I would like to explore now. I mean, you were the spokesperson of the Stasi records in Germany, so this is something on a national level, but maybe it continues even, like there are some lessons to learn on an international level, and there is some collaboration. So would you tell us a little bit about your work with the Stasi records, please?
Try to make it short and to the point. And I thought it's good to talk about this as a national effort in a country like Germany that has been very much invested in what is now called in Germany memory culture. We were the perpetrators of World War II and an atrocious Holocaust. So over 40 years, the Germans had to learn how to deal with that and find a way to put the facts on the table and deal with that. And it took a societal negotiation of 40 years at least to come to the point to admit the guilt and to admit the responsibility. On that type of idea and discussion came the end of East Germany, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the Ministry of State Security, many of you might know, some might not, was the instrument of repression. It was a centralized organization with many offices throughout East Germany. It was under the guidance of the KGB, the Soviet occupiers, so to say. And it was the site, that's important to say, of organization of repression. This is where, very German term from the first dictatorship, the desk perpetrators were sitting. This is not where the jails were or the torture chambers. This is where an organization, a bureaucracy of repression and surveillance was organized, and it was very much important to understand that the surveillance, the privacy of data, the interference of the state into personal lives was at the heart of what was documented. So there's a lot of privacy concerns when you look at these records, but when East Germany came to an end in 1989, in the so-called peaceful revolution, people took to the streets. They wanted to get rid of socialism and socialist one-party rule. And they pretty quickly turned their attention also to the Stasi. Because the Stasi, the Ministry for State Security, had been present, unbeknownst to them, clandestinely in the background. And they knew something was done about their fate. The state had done something, not just collect data, they had interfered in every person's life. And instead of saying, get rid of this, it's poisonous, we don't want to look at it, they demanded access to the records. Here all the way to the right, that's from the revolution, it says, where is my file? Freedom for my file, a very unique situation. And then after the peaceful revolution, oops, this was a little too fast, how do I go back? There we go, yeah. After the peaceful revolution, the United Germany fairly quickly decided that this idea from the revolution to open up the records should be something that should be granted. So in 1990, October 3rd, German unification, an institution was opened that for the first time, I would say worldwide, ever opened a complete secret police documentation. That was sort of breaking the taboo. It was easy because East Germany had vanished from the earth. It left the United Nations, it united with Germany, it was gone as a state. So the secrets of that state were easier to open up into society, but it was still quite an interesting and conflicted and hard process to make these records accessible to the victims, to every individual whose lives had been changed by the interference of a secret police, but also in exposing those responsible for the East German dictatorship and the repression. And those were the people that worked for the Stasi and that were informants all throughout society. So you can imagine that the dialogue was complex, but now we're 35 years further down the road, and the archive, the Stasi Records Archive, is now part of the Federal Archives, and it's been open for 35 years, and it's 111 kilometers of records and videos and audios and photographs. And the site where this archive is located in Berlin, and there's 12 regional sites, but Berlin is still the headquarters of the Stasi. So the historic site is where you encounter these records. And the last federal commissioner, when it was its own institution, was basically terming the historic site of the Stasi headquarters a campus for democracy. Again, quite conflicted, because people say, how can the place of organization of repression be called a campus for democracy? But it is basically about the fact that we learned from the past at the site, with the emotional impact of the site, with the records to support the facts of what happened, to start a discussion about how do we want to live today? What is our democracy about? So this is the idea. Also, it's an easier site because people in the peaceful revolution stormed this place and stopped the Stasi from working. They weren't freed from any outside forces. It was the people themselves who did that. And this idea of opening records led to basically a global international connection that you asked me about, yeah?
Yes, I asked you also because in the context of, we're at the Bled Strategic Forum, which has a special emphasis on Balkans and Western Balkans, right? And it is something that Germany has done in a excellent way to dealing with the past, Vergangenheitsbewältigung, and it is an ongoing process, of course. So this is maybe something that other countries, especially in the region, can get some lessons or exchange some best practices. So what has been done, what can be done, what is your point of view in that? Of course, you cannot transfer it one-to-one, because the situations are also different, but
right?
yeah.
Yeah. you know, I'm a little bit informed now of the session I attended before on reconciliation, right? And so one of the things after conflict is to bring people together, is to agree on the facts of what happened. And documentation is the way to do this. So the Stasi records are certainly a specific point of view. They're documenting the secret police aspect of the previous times, but there's names, there's responsible parties, and there's victims, and there's many bystanders. So this idea of opening this archive attracted a lot of international attention, because there's many post-conflict situations. Eastern Europeans had left the Soviet Union behind, or they fought for their own freedom, and they were not able to open their records or their archives right away, because they had to forge a new path with the old guard and the new people and the revolutionary ideas. And so they waited, and by 2000, the Germans opened in 1990, 2000, the first Eastern European country, Poland, opened its own archive. So now the other Eastern European countries under Soviet rule followed, because ultimately, keeping the archive closed and not talking about it doesn't make it go away. So that's the idea about America, right? So if you just pretend there's always a tomorrow and the past doesn't matter, you can do that, but it doesn't disappear. The past is always there. It's in archives. That's a very reliable source of long-term collection. And so there's a network of Eastern European archives, but also in the Balkans, there's one state on the Balkans, Albania, who was inspired by the Stasi Records archive. They looked at the Stasi Records Act. There's a rule of law access point to these records. They basically use it as a model to build their own Sigurimi access law. And since 2015, quite some time after the Albanian end of communist rule, they opened their archive. So the other people that you see come from all over the world, and the conflicts are extremely different. There's a Cambodian director of a tool slang museum that has to do with the Khmer Rouge and their atrocious rule. There's Tunisia, we all remember the Arab Spring. There's South Korea, because they are very much looking at German as a model of unification in a country that's still divided, and young people that work in transitional justice from all over the world. The conflicts are so different, and the qualities and are so different, but the mechanisms are the same. So using records to bring truth into the society for discussion proves to be an international idea that connects a lot of different people.
And if I'm not wrong, you were actually in Albania and you had a collaboration with them.
Yes.
Can you tell us just quickly a little bit about that?
I was invited a few times to basically share the experience of the Stasi Records archive. And of course, then the distinctions happen, right? So, but Germany is this case, but here in Albania it was very different. But then there's also, because they all have the same, tempted to say father or mother, but they have the same general idea, which is the KGB, right? So they come from this one-party rule and the suppression of people's individual rights, and rights to choose, and rights to vote, and rights to assemble, and free speech. So the system is kind of similar. So I was able even to say, look at the Stasi records, where they say, this is exactly how the Albanian Sigurimi made the records, and we could transfer knowledge, but then they also adapted to their own country. You cannot just take it one-on-one. You have to make sure that the negotiation in your own country, is with all the stakeholders and works for your country. But the general principles you can see, and you can ask about questions and conflicts and difficulties and things that work well, and then you can adopt and put it into your own country.
Thank you very much, Dagmar. I would move on to Banu. We have talked about, your focus is difficult heritage, and Dagmar mentioned it, that it is difficult also because if it's difficult to deal with, it becomes endangered. So this is where I would like to talk with you about, and your work with endangered cultural heritage. When we think about endangerment, we think about maybe climate change, but also conflicts, but also maybe being forgotten, a lack of finances. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Of course. So I work with cultural heritage, which is endangered, at risk. And everything can be at risk for one reason or another. It can be climate change, it can be war, it can be vandalism. It can be also memory politics. And so everything which is valuable is vulnerable, in a way, if you think of it. And the cultural heritage that I have been working for is that is important because it represents something somebody wants to remember or forget selectively. And we call it dissonant heritage. And I like the word because it comes from music theory, where two tunes are not in harmony. And this is where we sometimes have more than two memories, two histories. They're not in harmony. They make people uncomfortable. So they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to even see it. They want to see it demolished or just in ruins, so it just demolishes itself. This is a Georgian medieval church part of a monastery in northeastern Turkey. And there's a lot of national heritage, national identity politics involved in heritage politics, especially if you have a national discourse in a country or it's not very, in a way, as stable as you want it to be. And it hurts for a lot of people to see it like this or to even remember a past. And for the future, for the children, they just don't want a new slate, a blank slate, regardless of what background they're coming from. And for me, it's always also, as I said, a part of national identity, and it starts with people. And if you have different backgrounds, different ethnicities, minorities, they usually don't want to talk about their difficult past and have it in front of them. It's kind of the elephant or cathedral in the room for me. And the reason for this is that we're not trained to talk about difficult things. We don't know how to, so people need guidance. In the meantime, I had to become an international qualified mediator to learn how to bring sides together. I started with architectural restoration, nothing to do with people. And now I realize it has everything to do, and it's all about people. It's not, as most people think, cultural heritage restoration is not about pretty things. It's about people. It's about keeping them there, keeping their memories and respecting them and giving them their dignity in a way. So you do a lot of projects working with cultural heritage at risk, endangered. You come across many hardships, whether it's a government or embargoes or some nationalist groups. But then you do something where you find very unexpected results. We got requests from monument keepers, so people who are responsible for the upkeep of a mosque, of a national library, of a church, and they wanted us to give them training on how to even keep their building safe and how to maintain it and so on. And yes, we did that, but the best thing was the coffee breaks, the networking, where they realized the problem is not whether they're from this religion, that ethnicity, it was that they all had a leaking roof. And they started inviting each other to their buildings. They said, oh, we have a really good guy I can send you to fix your roof. Oh, I have a good guy who polishes the floor. And it was no longer about, your building is from that faith, mine is from this. It's really about, we have the same problem. Also, we are seen very differently from the people who fund us. And in a long run, I saw that this contributes to establishing local joint histories, but also it facilitates dialogue, and it really promotes equal citizenship, which is something you don't have where you have multiple different groups coming together on very unequal levels.
May I just ask quickly, because you said about equal citizenship, and this is, of course, the topic when we talk, and right now, with all the conflicts going on, given your background in urban transformation, what about restoring such projects, about such restoration projects in post-conflict context? Like, can we, because it's difficult, right, in post-conflict to restore buildings and where...
It's immensely difficult, especially if you come from the perspective of civil society, and you see a lot of money flowing into post-conflict, post-devastation landscapes where people, for example, Qatar gave 130-something billion for an archaeological site in Sudan or something, and it's always these funders trying to restore that kind of postcard monuments, the minaret, the bell tower. And then you see feel-good images of a concert done there. But the question for me is, who is that done for? Because I come from academia and civil society. Who is that Mint bell tower restored for? Because if we have one important monument which is destroyed, obviously there are a lot of houses destroyed. Is there water there? Do people get food? And that's the problem, because most people want to act like, the funders want to act like saviors. The governments want to give the impression of everything's fine. See, we're having, the prayers are there, we're having our concerts. And then, of course, they want to establish power if there's after a civil unrest. And then the thing that suffers is, of course, the the monuments and everything, but the people. Because if you don't have a home to go to, if you don't have food or clean water, what is the point of having a big funder pool money into a big monument there to be restored? And then the question is, what do we want to preserve? What's the message that we get when some people give us funding for something we really don't need at that moment?
So yeah, I mean, from the aspect of civil society and the funders from outside, it is always a negotiation, right? And we do not want to have a checklist from outside with certain ideas just to fulfill some kind of criteria on paper, but it is also about ownership, like owning this place and having an emotional connection.
It is about also giving the people a voice there, and I definitely think of that because also working, because I had to go into peace building when I went into this field. So we always talk about positive peace, and that's not just an absence of violence, it's also institutions and structures to foster something, an establishment, a feeling of peace. Okay. And that is what work like this can contribute to. And just one example, this was to give you like a physical example. Usually these sites are, we restored just a normal house, and we made it was open to visit the work site. You could come, you could schedule tours if you wanted. The architect could take you around, and it was a multicultural site. It has histories of different ethnicities living here, and it was, after it was restored, it was given to the use of the community. And we worked with stakeholders even before we started any planning. What they needed, did they need a new kindergarten? Did they need a place to store their food, to have their weddings? And this was all adapted for that. And in the end, our goal is not to eliminate conflicts, and this is what we wrote about with Dagmar. We wrote an article for the Bled Strategic Times, which we would appreciate if you read and come back to us with any. Page 24?
This thing doesn't like to cooperate with me, so it's 24 and 25.
Yes. You can come back to us with any critical comments. So that's what we wrote there. We're not there. We don't want to eliminate conflicts, because that says if a conflict is there, there's something wrong there. People are not equipped to deal with it. So we really want to keep the light on the problem and then learn from it. And one comment I want to also add is you talked about what happens if it's not preserved. You know, we can't keep everything. There's some past. And maybe it's a romantic way of seeing it, but I've seen hundreds of sites which won't be there in 50 years, and there's nothing to do. Hundreds of languages which have been forgotten. And I know of this concept, maybe most of you do know it, of the whale fall. So when a whale dies, it sinks to the very bottom of the ocean, to a place it would never be naturally, if it was alive. And it disintegrates, and feeds an organism down there, which survives through that. So I always hope to think that somehow things that sink and die feed other future organisms and new ideas. Because I have accepted we can't preserve and save everything except archives. Yeah.
Now you have put the image of the whale and the whole ecosystem in the ocean in our minds. Thank you very much for that, and for your input. When we think about harnessing the power of cultural heritage, we now saw different layers and aspects of it, being it like the international, the national responsibility and collaborating internationally, being it on a local level in order to really have an impact right there, and then to scale it up, to connect with your local community and to create roots there, but also narratives that are long-lasting, and to preserve and to see also what is possible and what are other possibilities if you cannot preserve. If you would like to have any questions, yes, please. I would like to give the opportunity. Maybe we have a microphone, or I can give mine. Yes, there. We'll be right back at you. Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry. This was a spontaneous idea.
Thank you. My name is Robert Bauchmüller. And thank you very much for sharing your experience with nurturing this heritage, with the dissonance of the 3 projects you shared with us. But these were projects that are tangible, that are monuments, that are documents, that are houses. Nowadays, especially young generations, create immense amount of heritage content on social media with true facts, and yeah, some are not facts. But what can we learn from your work that we kind of give guidance or give training, new skills to how we can use social media and the heritage and the stories that are built there about our lives, our memories for the future? What can we learn? Because in future there's so much digital heritage.
Yeah, I mean, I would like just to say something quickly to that, because if we talk about intangible cultural heritage, we have in many cultures, so I'm from Kosovo, for example, and the way to deal with memory there, it's not a culture of writing it down, but rather oral history. So we have projects there, which is called Oral History, a website where you have people telling stories and telling history. You have songs, right? So all this, of course, from a Western or Eurocentric perspective, it is always more valuable if we have something written down, and if it's not written down, it's not valuable. But actually, we have history and stories, songs, how history and memory was given to other generations. But I see your point with the digital, so I would ask, maybe, I don't know, Dagmar, would you like to answer this? Yeah?
Well, you transfer, first of all, what's in the analog world and the digital world. So the archives, the sites, the museums, you know, everything that's called GLAM, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, their presence online is just almost as big as in real life, right? So, but you have to, of course, teach the truthfulness of the facts of the past and the critical interaction with the media. So I hope, you know, that's a dream from humanity, just like Banu's idealized version is, that we don't lose our interaction with our senses and actually go to sites and actually feel a page of a book and actually go to a ruin and climb it up, because the experience, because we're human beings, you know, we're not just fingers glued to a screen, right? So, and the experience of that is much more meaningful, and it's up to all of us to sort of encourage that type of stuff. But of course, if you don't communicate your ideas, the archives, the history, at the place where communication happens, it is bound to be forgotten, just like a building that's dissonant, and so that's the type of stuff. But I think we'd also need to negotiate a better way of interaction with the reality, and then the critical skill to question the narratives. I mean, that's when I meant it was a process, right? Of course, it's our identity, heritage. Where do we come from? What's on the page feels so heavy, not oral, it's not an oral tradition, but it's just the convention that we created. If we all go digital, God knows what a piece of paper might be, how superfluous it might be in 100 years. We just don't know. So we're constantly in flux, right? So that requires a lot more thinking, and I think that's the biggest challenge, to really give to a new generation the critical skill of questioning what's there and finding the means, the different sources, the different memories and narratives, and come to their own understanding, ideally based on an agreement of facts. I think that's the most important thing that we cannot lose.
Thanks very much. I think I should admit, first of all, that I have no cultural heritage. I'm half Ukrainian, half Portuguese. I was born in London. My sister's French, and I was the mayor of a Spanish city. And now I'm living and working between Spain and between Nairobi at the UN. So therefore, I'm culturally confused. But at the same time, because I'm a politician, I use everything that I can. Call me Mr. Cynical if you wish. And what we do is, when we're working on the social political problems created by climate change, such as migration, gender equality, and health, we're using contemporary local cultures to engage people at a local level. To what extent can historical cultural aspects be converted into a form of permanent engagement with their own community, so that they are prepared to look at the problems of today?
I'll just say one sentence. I really believe in pushing it into people's faces, so putting it out there on the street, and because otherwise, like, people who don't go to museums will not go to museums. So having it in unexpected places through unexpected mediums and interpretations.
I can add that the Stasi headquarters, as doomy as that location is, every summer now has an open-air movie theater. And the movies that are shown there have to do with history, but you make people a part of that place. You give them a stake in it, right? So I think even history, that's what Annegret talked about. You connect yourself, your own identity, your own life story to a historic site, to a history, and that way it comes alive. And then there's something, and climate works really well with that, because climate threatens where you come from, what your identity is, what your history is. Even if we have to add the confused cultural heritage to our list of things now, but somehow there's always a place, a longing for belonging, right? So, and that can be very well, I think, connected to a physical place and a site and its history, and that you want to preserve also from climate problems and destruction.
Yeah, and like connecting local populations to historic sites or cultural heritage, I think it requires an ongoing process, and it's also clear that you cannot reach everyone at once. And I think also the way you connect people to these places has to change. It depends on the organization. So from a perspective of the city of Stuttgart, I would rather try to work with different stakeholders who have access to different populations, and then also develop different forms of engagement. So for some population, like a cultural festival would be the right thing. For young people, maybe workshops would be a right thing. For other populations, like a guided tour is the right thing to connect. So I think it really needs resources and a process structure, to continuous work with it in different ways.
Thank you so much. As I promised, we will have also an interactive part, like the first one was just the beginning. And yes, thank you. And we heard all these examples, but we know in our everyday life, using these tools is sometimes difficult, or to come back to them and to think outside the box. So we're doing a little exercise to motivate us to think outside the box, and to use and to harness the power of cultural heritage. With my background, I didn't say much about me at the beginning, but I'm a former diplomat, and I worked in the cultural sphere and building structures in a post-war country in civil society. So I have seen this from different point of views, what the challenges are when you deal with certain question. And we will do the same now here. We will ask you to take different standpoints from different stakeholders and come up with ideas. Yes, so there is a little story. You know Grand Hotel Draznov. Oh, sorry, I thought there was somebody. Grand Hotel Draznov in the country of Modena. You haven't heard of it? I'm not surprised. So you see, it is a little story that I will tell you about the Grand Hotel, which was once a luxurious place, full with intellectuals, with artists, politicians, who would meet and who would take decisions on the future, envision the future of the country, and have wonderful dinners, parties, and soirees, similar to the one we had last night. They have a wonderful time. And later, in the country of Modena, there was a big conflict in the society, and the hotel became also the place of surveillance, of torture, and of horrific stories. This is in a country, the conflict was about two different ethnic groups, and we are trying to find solutions for this hotel. We have here some images. Forgive us if they're a bit strange. I have used some AI tools to create them. I was like, let's dare it and see what comes out. You will see it. And the hotel is today decaying. So the question is, what should be done with it? How can it become a national treasure for all sides? So we have to have that in mind. We want to find solutions for the Grand Hotel Draznov, and we want to be creative with that. There are 3 points that we have. We want to honor the past. This is something that all the parties agree upon. Acknowledge the mistakes that happen, and build a more united future. So this story is stir up some memories of our own from countries we come from. Yeah, I'll do it now. So as I said, we have different stakeholders, and we will put ourselves in the shoes of several stakeholders, and we will start with the child of 2 communities. Maybe, may I? Yes. Ha, here you are. So you are a child of parents from 2 different communities, the Varkan community and the Eldaki community. And these 2 communities have different memories and different connection to the Grand Hotel of Draznov. While Varkan wants to remember the suffering and memorialize the courage that it took, the Eldaki want to revive the legacy and honor the past. So you can imagine which community was doing what in this hotel and what they were suffering through, or also enjoying. So if you are a child of this community, what is your vision for the future, having these 3 points in mind? I will start with maybe one of you, so meanwhile you get the hang of it. Banu, would you like to start?
Oh, okay, so like my father's Varkan,
yes,
and my mother's Eldaki.
Yes.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody with confused heritage can help me. I would hold a big party. No. I would bring together children like me who have mixed heritage and do something not related to the past, but something like, I don't know, cook together. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. How does that sound?
That's perfect. I mean, this is enough. We keep going on. We have a different stakeholders, a different perspective. Imagine you work for an NGO and you get an email, and it says you will get 1 million euros, maybe 10 million euros right now. 1 million isn't so much anymore. And they asked you to come up with a project for the future of the hotel. And what do you come up with? What is your vision for the hotel? Thank you. Next slide we have here. Ah, yeah, here it is. You see? Foreign funds for national NGO, so your national NGO. It's also your opportunity to have, to cover your expenses, your running costs in your NGO. So you have to come up with an innovative and creative idea what to do. Do you have maybe an idea, or one of you, would you like?
You gave us a good starting point with this picture.
With a picture.
So you might make 1 room, 2 stories.
Yeah.
You might use it 1 room, 2 stories.
Yeah.
And make on the left side 1 story represented, and on the right hand the other side of the story. So 2 museums in 1 room.
2 museums in 1 room.
And the chandelier or so is the great connecting element, how you can look at it as a sign of hope or a sign of glorious life, or
the light.
The
right?
chandelier,
Yeah.
in the middle.
Yeah.
It was in both places.
Yes, yes, and it brings the light also, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea? Maybe let's have a look. Do you have an idea?
So I'm a visual artist, so
yes.
I do large public installations that inspire dialogue. To me, I think you're asking the impossible, which is to tell a story from 2 different points of view. And history, as Isaiah Berlin said, is not an exact science, because facts are very difficult to establish. Depends who's telling them and when. So maybe places like this could be a testament to something else, to the fact that the rule or the luxury or the classes on top will not always stay on top, and that the suffering will not be continuous, that too shall pass. So maybe if, I mean, and this is from an artist perspective, I would keep it as it is.
Okay.
And I would make some kind of, I'm not an architect, I'm an artist, so I always imagine the impossible. Make like a glass elevator in the middle so that people can see that these things come to pass, including life of luxury and being on top. And that's what ruling classes have to remember, that it's not forever. And that the suffering is also not forever. You will come out of it. You know, in the Bosnian War in the beginning, we thought it was going to end in 15 days. And 2 years later, we thought it was never going to end.
Okay.
So which is also kind of a point of human suffering. You don't think it will, I mean, from a toothache, you don't think it will ever, you know, end. So maybe to tell a story and to try to use cultural heritage to a bigger question is, how do we build human identity? Because the pandemic and the climate crisis are something that we have to elevate ourselves from these national, religious, and other identities to human identity. And when we understand that we're primarily human and that we're all connected, especially in this crisis where there's no borders, then we'll be able to kind of understand that problem and make it more tangible.
Thank you.
As a,
Thank you so much. It's such a
so
creative
anymore.
idea, and I love the transparency of the elevator. Do we have time? 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. Shall we go with one more, or what do you think? Can we maybe come up with?
Or is there more questions?
Yeah, we can also go with more questions. Well, then I will have one more. So imagine you are because I have prepared several different stakeholders, being it a politician or a EU membership, EU representative, but I would like to go also because this is very interesting about a local politician who is in the situation from the city, who is in the situation that he's facing a new party, populist party, who is relying heavily on a disinformation campaign on social media, and using this to have the idea to tear down. How do I go back? Like this? Yes. Yes, you see. With the TikTok and everything, with the idea to tear down the hotel, so destroy the whole memory. How do you approach it? What do you do? Do you have an idea? Do you? Impossible questions, I know, but it's just an exercise. Poisonous fungi. Okay, we're coming to bringing back Mother Nature for solutions. Dagmar, maybe, or Banu, or?
Well, it's, in terms of fighting disinformation, right? It's unfortunately facts don't really help that much. It's a highly emotional idea. It's a group thing, but nonetheless, I would definitely make sure that there is a process of getting the facts out. And then it's just talking to people and finding the source of their need to identify with the tearing down and with false facts, right? So that's what needs to be addressed. They're not wrong. They just follow a certain idea, and there's something why they follow this idea that we need to find out. And do I have time to make a quick comment on your suggestion?
We do have time.
because what you said, it's so phenomenal as an idea and as a fantastic idea. It made me think of the fact that it's so hard because heritage is identity. And what you're asking people by letting go of this identification with this heritage is letting go of part of themselves. And that is, people are...
Can we transcend it?
Can we transcend it, right?
Hold on to it.
I know, but how much do I hold on how much the negotiation between holding on to it and my identity and what's after I let go and who am I then, right? So these questions are not easy. It's very much human nature. It's not easy for people to make that step because they're afraid of change and mostly very much afraid of changing their identity because then you're lost. Who am I? So that's why they cling so much, and that's why your imagination of riding with the elevator to let go of all these versions and come to this new space is fantastic. And it's really hard to figure out how to make humans behave against their own nature in that sense.
But in order to solve our global problems, we're going to have to become superhuman.
I think so too.
I invite you all, I think you three will be outside. Also, I invite you all to continue this conversation if you have time. I had actually prepared more questions also for you and more personas, so we can spin our mind. But I'm getting the sign that this is the end of the session, and the next session is waiting to come in. I hope that this helped you to see the cultural heritage as really an opportunity to bridge parallel realities, parallel societies, and to see the strength of it, because it doesn't have to be something that divides, but the same way it can divide, it can also bring people together. I would like to thank you three for your insights and also for the time you will take maybe afterwards. I would like to thank Bled Strategic Forum for having us and the Global Diplomacy Lab for making this possible. Thank you very much.